I'm joined by Alison, Kirsty and Poppy. Kirsty is a facilitator on our NPQLBC programme, and Alison and Poppy recently successfully undertook the SAT. Congratulations. Thank you all for joining us today. We're really looking forward to sort of hearing your perspectives, your lived experiences of what the programme has been for you. Firstly, Kirsty, could I start with you, please? As a facilitator working on the LBC, what were your highlights of the programme, and what feedback have you had from participants?
So highlights for me personally have been actually seeing the delegates changing their perspectives. So based on the research, looking at what's going on in their school, and actually having some moments of where they're talking with each other of, oh, actually, I thought this, now actually I'm thinking this might be a more appropriate route or a more appropriate way of dealing with things. It's been really good to see how they've worked together, how they've supported each other, taken ideas from each other and from the course itself. And the feedback we've been getting from the delegates is that having the opportunity to talk to the facilitators, but also to talk to each other and talk about the research has really supported them understanding what works well in their school or what could work well in their school. As we have the same delegates in all three events, what's been really lovely is watching their confidence grow in terms of how they talk. If they're not part of SLT, they talk to SLT, how they want to take ideas forward and already start to have an impact in the school. Even in just small ways in the classroom or whole school approaches, and really thinking about what they could be doing better and the impact they're going to have on their pupils, also pupils moving forward. So that, for me, they've been the real highlight of facilitation for the course.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Kirsty. That was so good to hear about the benefit that participants have been finding in that collaborative working, the networking, the sharing ideas, but also that sense of growth of confidence, a sense of perspective, seeing it in different ways, and sense of themselves as leaders as well as practitioners in other senses. So I really appreciate that, Kirsty. Thank you. Okay, so can we go to Poppy and Alison now? I'll start with you, Poppy, if that's all right. Could you just tell us a little bit about your role first, and then what the most impactful pieces of learning on the NPQLBC have been for you?
Yes, of course. So I am currently an English teacher in a very small secondary school in the northeast of England. So it's a very deprived area. However, I find that whilst doing the NPQLBC, so many of the statements, or the learn how to learn that statements, were so impactful in the sense that I could use them in my classroom. I could literally go to the training and the next day I could use them in the classroom. So that was impacting not only of my understanding, my behaviours and my learning, but also you could see that in the pupils as well. With that, I think it's such a vast amount of research that you cover all the way through it. So being able to understand, you know, if I'm looking at staff well-being, pupil well-being, looking at behaviour, additional needs behaviour or reasonable adjustments, I've been able to cover every single bit of that learning and then thought about how it could impact my setting mostly.
Brilliant, Poppy, thank you so much. And it's really struck me actually what you've said about I could literally pick up those statements and take them into the classroom the next day. So, and it's having an impact on not only your leadership practice, but your classroom practice as well. Fantastic, thank you. Alison, so could you tell us a little bit about your role then and what the most impactful pieces of learning on the NPQLBC have been for you?
Yeah, will do. So I'm a pastoral care manager, designated senior lead. In a primary school in Birmingham, central of Birmingham. What I found really powerful for us was looking at how to manage children with complex behaviour needs. It looked at how you can have flexible consistency, so you have reasonable adjustment without lowering your standards. And it was really insightful to learn how to accommodate children with special educational needs or other barriers to learning or emotional needs. Really love the fact that it looked at how to build a culture by design and not let it be by default. So bringing everybody on board, it really helped me with confidence in approaching people and gave me the knowledge to back everything up I ever put in training. So it was really a powerful tool for me because it just expanded my knowledge and was let me spread it across the school to help us improve our whole school approach.
Thank you, Alison. And do you know what? That was so interesting to get some real insights of very practical things. You know, you talking about flexible consistency, reasonable adjustments without lowering expectation and standards, and talking about culture by design and not by default. And that's a really, really important part of leadership, an intended culture for how you all work together. And in this case, in terms of behaviour and culture. So brilliant. Thank you so much. Very, very powerful. So back to you, Kirsty, if that's all right. Have there been any commonly arising questions from your NPQ LBC participants?
Yes. So the biggest one at the start always is I am not in a level of responsibility to change what's happening at the culture of the school, or my SLT is not approachable. How do I go about approaching them? And then, or maybe it's not the priority in school, can often be one as well. So that's really interesting because we often then have conversations, and really good conversations within the group, within that are there about, well, for starters, they've agreed for you doing this course, so it is a priority, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But also about how do we approach them, how can we instigate those initial conversations, and then actually what we find by the second or the third session is that they've started to make inroads and make real progress in that. And then the question changes to, it's not consistent. How do I make this consistent across the school? This is something we're looking at. How does it become part of the culture of the school, so that we can overcome barriers within a team, maybe where one person is not willing to step up, change their approach, and so we can do some work and some coaching within the session together as a group on, or actually what can we do, what's worked in our schools, what's worked in different settings, how can we approach that. So they are the main sort of questions that we get around the NPQLBC.
Thank you, Kirsty. I hear a lot there about empowering the participants within those face-to-face events to be considering, well, how are we going to get around that? And then what I'm really hearing is that as their confidence grows and their knowledge grows, the questions change because they're empowered to be leading in a different way. That's really interesting. And I'd like to come back to Poppy and Alison then about what the impact has been from the NPQLBC on you to date. Alison, can we go to you first?
Yeah, we've literally did a whole new behaviour policy that we launched in September. So I actually launched it while alongside doing the NPQ, which was exciting. But I've had extremely good feedback from all the teachers. I mean, I've got some quotes from a questionnaire I did with them. Behaviour has greatly improved. The one I think that resonated with me was that they said, especially with the explosive outbursts, and that was looking at the complex behaviour needs that we had within our school and looking at how we can adjust our whole school approach, but make it accommodate for everyone and include that flexible consistency. So without lowering our standards, we had this, most of the time it's good. We've also implemented coaching within the staff. So we're working with our staff, not against them. We're taking on ideas, feedback from them. I find it really useful. And my biggest thing is it's given me the confidence, the knowledge, and it's also been really good to back up everything I'm saying with evidence. So that's what I've took on board and brought to the table.
Wow, I'm not sure we can argue with those impacts. That's incredible. Thank you.
Amazing.
Really that. So Poppy, to you, what about the impacts for you?
Truthfully, I think I was I must have been one of Kirsty's imaginary pupils in hers, actually, to be honest, because I was that person. So at the start, I was like, I would never be able to go and speak to SLT about this. Like, what place do I have to speak about behaviour? You know, I'm just a classroom teacher. You know, I'm not an SLT. However, starting being able to go through the course and, you know, having that evidence and having those conversations and, you know, inputting all of my data and analysing the data in our school, I've then been able to go to SLT and say, I think this is what we could do moving forwards. I think this would have a larger impact on our pupils. So my confidence is totally grew with it, really. I have now started working with our head of behaviour in our school, and there is now a role open around senior mental health lead in school and associate assistant head in regards to behaviour. So there are roles and responsibilities that I'm starting to move towards, but I just know that before this course I would never have been able to access that or even myself for it so yeah, so I have now been able to have those conversations, start that training. I am running some staff wellbeing around, you know, how we can deal with our own wellbeing, how we can lead it to our pupils, using questionnaires, starting to do the training. So I think overall for my personally, it's impacted on my confidence, but it's also really, really developing my career progression, and I couldn't have asked for anything more, really.
Wow. I said beat it, Poppy. I'm not sure. This is amazing. So the impacts I'm hearing are hugely practical for you both. There's been serious shifts within both of your schools in terms of behaviour and culture, but also in your own practice as leaders, but all your own confidence also. This is huge. Brilliant. Okay. So Kirsty, then, can I come back to you just finally to ask? We saw earlier a little bit around the input about participants coming from lots and lots of different kinds of roles and pathways into this NPQ. In your face-to-face events with the people that you've worked with, what have been the roles and the reach of some of them, just so that we can get a bit of a gauge?
Okay, yeah, so I sort of tried to write down the different people we've had. So it's been a real range of people. We've had people who are, say, in their third or fourth year of their career. It's been people who work in a college, people who work in the secondary sector, people who work in the primary sector. We've had delegates from SEMH schools, from alternative provisions, taking part in it. And we've had people who are on senior management teams or senior leadership teams. We've had people who are the SENCO coming on, and because that's part of their role. And it's been a really wide reach. I mean, and from a personal perspective, we're actually looking at putting our assistant vice principal on the course next year, who is lead for behaviour, and she's got the NPQSL already under the old system. But we're looking at putting her on the course. We did actually also, from our perspective, have a person in mind who's a third year teacher who actually wants to improve their understanding of behaviour and culture. It's one of their areas of development. We were looking at putting them on it as well. So from a school perspective, because of the input I have through facilitating the course, I was planning on putting two people at extreme ends of the career on the course. And I know the question came up about, is it primary or is it secondary? We predominantly get secondary in our cohorts, which from a primary perspective, and I'm a primary head teacher, I think is a real shame, because actually, and this is a bit right, it said I get passionate, I talk a lot if I get passionate. If we can't get it right in primary, it's harder for secondary. So actually, I think we're underestimating the power of primaries and the importance of behaviour and culture in primaries if we're not, as head teachers, in a different perspective now, as head teachers put input on the NPQLBC. I've seen firsthand from the facilitating side the impact it can have for different ranges and different schools and settings. I think it's really valuable that more primary schools are getting involved in it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kirsty. That's so helpful. But not only the breadth, but the importance in terms of your leadership values of looking at LBC topics early in the age groups. That leads actually really nicely to Louise's question in the chat box. She's a new primary head across a federation of 2 schools, and one of her teachers is about to finish her 2 years as an ECT. She's really keen to develop a clear route, a clear role for herself and behaviour and culture seems ideal. She also thinks the LBC would be good for her as well. And I think they're thinking of doing it together. And she said, this is a great question. If we both do it, do we each need a coach, or could we share one, e.g. our current Senko or behaviour lead? Louise, it is completely up to you how you want to do it. It's going to depend on capacity and workload. So if that Senko behaviour lead has capacity to be the in-school performance coach for you both, absolutely, and that could bind the direction of the school. What we would encourage you to do is, if you do have the same ISPC, in-school performance coach, is to ensure that you contract lightly when you're working with them, to keep the conversations separate where they need to be separate. There is a really kind of ethical part around being able to come back to your in-school performance coach as a participant and have that conversation that may impact on the other person that's also taking the programme. So just sensitivities, I guess, and lots of schools do it in different ways. And it might be that Kelly's question answers the bit about capacity, Louise, for your Senko or behaviour lead. Kelly has asked, does the coach have to do any work? Thinking on their workload, as I have a current teacher who would probably take on this role. Great question, Kelly. We're actually working a lot with ISPCs at the moment to iron this out, to really clarify it. The role they have is to facilitate support for you, and for you to be enabled to just put my teeth back in, for you to be enabled to take accountability for your own programme, for your own application in practice. And they don't have to touch any of the paperwork. They don't give you any formal feedback. They give you feedback within in-school performance coaching sessions, but you write that up on the template, the LDR. So there are currently several ISPC sessions throughout the year, and we're just looking at adjusting that at the moment. So there will be a couple of mandatory and a couple of suggested ISPC coaching sessions throughout the 12 months. So it's light for them, but they are there to facilitate and to support. So I hope that answers, Kelly. Okay, thank you so much to our guests. I really, really appreciate everything you've said, and I hope that you could hang on for when we get to the question and answer section, in case there's something that would be really useful to come directly from you guys. So thank you all very much. We really